Welcome to the tutorial for HeartLines. This is a new patch that is a source that basically has these lines that are being affected by a distorted noise in the background that cycles through and creates this kind of interesting effect. A myriad of different ways you could use this to create all kinds of different looks for your scenes, your VJing, whatever you feel that this needs to be a part of. It's meant to be like a jumping off point. It's meant to be this, beautiful kind of rotation cycle. It's very similar in the feel behind the scenes to my halftone screens, and so that's kind of where I was thinking. I wanted something that had a very similar effect, where it's cycling through and it's making these kind of patterns on its own, this generative kind of design. So I've got these examples of some of this and what they look like. I figured I would go through the tutorial on basically all the different effects, or the different basically the sliders, to kind of give you an idea as to what they do. So in any case, without further ado, I'm just going to throw a patch up here of just a new one. This is the basic default, right? It's the pink. But there's all kinds of different settings in here. I just wanted to kind of give you a quick run through. You have your first two, or the first two are the actual noise itself. So you have your fractal, and then you also have your meta, and you're transitioning between the two. And then you also have the option on the meta ball side is to change where the fuzziness is, right? So then you could make this kind of like dust kind of look, right? These little circles, as you can see. But you may want to increase that or decrease that. So this gives you the option to kind of control those settings, right? Just the metaball option. But if you go to fractal, it doesn't really change anything there. It's just a slider for just the metaball. That's the one that's just below the fracta meta. And that's the first setting. In some cases, you may want, a mixture of both. And so that's kind of where this lies in. And then there's also a zoom in and zoom out, and that is to increase or decrease the size of the metaball / fractal noise. And that way it's affecting what you see on the screen, but it's only affecting it's like, as you can see, the pattern is not as large, where if we zoomed out on it, you would really get like lots of just crazy noise everywhere. So it's really kind of up to you. This is, again, one of those, my patches, the source patches, I constantly am thinking about how can this be more universal? How can you make it so that you can get more bang for your buck? In some cases, it kind of feels like, I make all these patches and they're not like specific to one thing, which is kind of, it's kind of freeing, but at the same time, it also makes it generic. So it's, how do you make it unique enough that it's something that is interest to my customers? That would be you. Or, how do I make it so that it has many, many different customizations and you can customize it to your specific scenes. So again, I want to make sure that there are many features that you can mess around with and get the most out of the patch, right? So that it could fit many different things. So we have this move X, and we also have this move Y. So moving up and down and left and right, because there may be a time where you want to be like, I like this patch, but I don't want it to be in the same place as the other. I have another copy of this somewhere else in my layer stack. I want the same pink, but I don't want the same pattern to repeat or whatever. You have the option to kind of change it around and change it up. So that's what the move out, the zoom in and out is, and the move X, move Y. The pattern cycle is a very similar kind of thing. It's to cycle the speed of the pattern, right? So the oscillation of the gradient behind the scenes. This is utilizing basically the noise is a black and white and it's a gradient, and so I use a colorize that basically shifts through the different cycles of color of black and white. So same kind of thing here. If you go over to fractal and you change the pattern cycle, it oscillates very quickly, right? It goes from the black to the white, back to the black to the white. And so on and so forth. So you have the option to really make it really slow if you so choose to, or you can make it really crazy. It's up to you, right? You also have the option for gradation cycle. That's also the same kind. It's a very similar kind of thing. It speeds up how fast it's going to oscillate between the gradations of pattern, right? Same thing here. If we have it over here on the meta side, it's going to oscillate the white dots that are the meta, that it's going to make like a circular pattern. It's going to go in a circular pattern. You have the two options for your color, of course. This really is this color in and color in 2. The color in is the first one is the highlighted hot pink, of course, and then the purple is the background color, I guess you could say, right? So this is more of the foreground color, and this one's the background. It's to basically so that you can control how it's being immersed, right? So if I change this to dark red, you'll notice that there is no more bloom, and the reason why is because it's no longer bright. In order for the bloom to work, it needs to be a lighter color. The lighter the color, the more brilliant it's going to be. There's also a bloom slider here, so if it's too blown out, you can shrink that down, and you can really kind of control that as you see fit. You may want it, somewhere about here, or like for instance, if you had a darker color, sometimes you can really push that to its limits, and you'll notice that it's starting to. If I slow down my gradation cycle, you'll notice that the reds, as they come together, they're getting darker, or they're getting more blown out, or they're getting more bloom, I should say, right? So there's ways you can fix this. You can make it so that it's really starting to bloom a lot more. Go to HSB, for instance, and you just want to hike up the red a little bit more and just bring in some white. And as you can see already, it's starting to blow out those areas. And again, you could just basically slide this down, your bloom, so that you get it balanced where you want it. So you're getting the colors that you so choose. And the same thing with the red, it's the purple, it's mixing the red with the purple to kind of give us this gradation in between. So that's the reason why I like doing this, is because it really kind of makes it feel like it's just organic. It's got this nice feel to it. So now we're getting into the part that's a little bit more, like there's a little bit more to it. Everything else from here on out is about the lines themselves. So if you go down here to the bottom, you'll notice I have a row amount. A row amount is exactly that. It's how many rows are in the lines, and then the row size, the line size, right? So if I shrink down the line size, you can see you get this. But if I also increase the line amount, you get this kind of, it reminds me of elevation maps, right? You get that same kind of feel when you start to lessen the lines, and you'll notice that as it makes these circles, it really starts to feel like you're starting to feel this platform, right? It starts to make these platforms because the darker areas are the black, and so it recedes. So, cool colors recede. So technically you could start putting in some cool colors, and you could put in some more, warm colors like this red. We'll just keep it as that red. And then if we had that blooming, you get that kind of feel like things are pushing forward. So the warm things are pulling forward and the cool things are receding. So I think that is kind of, the premise behind this is that I wanted, or not the premise, but that is like a kind of a sub thing that I really like to do, is I really, in my patches, like to create those sense of depth, so that you get this, like the red is pulling forward and the blue is pushing back. I really, for me as an artist, that is something that I really enjoy a great deal. So in any case, so then you also have the warp gain. The warp gain is the warp of the lines themselves with the displacement, right? So as the colors are being warped, or excuse me, as the displacement is warping the lines, you get this kind of like they start to the circles started to loop in on themselves, and that's just because the warp gain is set up so high. So those areas, that's what they do, right? So like you could set this low so that you still have a nice variation between tone, right? But as you notice, the lines, the bloom starts to bloom and make the line thicker in those areas, which is visually interesting to me. Okay, so there's just a couple more things, just real quick. The scene in and out, I've given you all the curve options. The curve options are basically the gradients that are happening here. So it's how they bend around each corner. So if you have linear, this is straight, just a gradient that has no curve to it at all. It's going from the blacks to the whites, and all 255 colors in between. If you mess with some of these others, you'll get different results. And the reason why is because the curve of those gradients, the white and black, there'll be more black in some cases and more whites in others. Like, for instance, if you do a quadratic in, I believe, don't quote me on this, is that the black is pushed, the values of the gradation are pushed more towards the black. Okay, and vice versa, quadratic out is the values are pushed more towards the right, to the white, or is it the other way around? In any case, basically you have those options. You can do either or. You could do quadratic in, quadratic out. You could do scene in and scene out. There's more to this if you're interested in how this works. Look up that particular, look up curves, and each one of these will do some different things. Like, for instance, bounce out. Now you get this kind of like bounce curve, as you can see. You're starting to see, and this is bounce in and out. So you're getting it both on the left, the dark side, and then the light side as well, or however that is. It's either white or light or dark. But like, for instance, you could also do just a bounce out. So you'll now notice you only get the bounces in the blue area, right? And that just has to do with how it's set up, right? So it's really lots of fun. There's lots of unique ways that you could use this, because you can get some really different results by just simply changing this value here. And then you also have the option for the row amount, right? And when you add those together, so like here's your row size, right? And increase the row size, and then when you do like a back in, you'll notice that now we have these kind of like dominant, brighter areas. And you could change the bloom, right? If the bloom is too much, you could bring that down just so that it's peaking just a little bit. It's not, so as it gets closer to the top of the levels of the light values, it's more brilliant, but as it bleeds down, it makes into this darker blue, right? So I really like how that works. In any case, I keep saying in any case, sorry about that. Okay, so you also have the option for gradation. The gradation is the tone. It sets the tone, right? So right at this moment, it's set for radial gradient. So the radial gradient's in the middle of that space, right? But you can also set it to vertical gradient, which means that you're going to get more of these bloom areas, and the lighter colors are going to be more towards the bottom, and the top is going to be more of a haze. It's kind of a hard thing to see, but basically if I were to change this around just a bit, if I change the warp gain is again changing the values of the lines, right? Or the where the values are being hit. And also, if I change my gradation opacity, this is the newer one that I'm going to tell you about. Gradation opacity is also controls the lines and how they're set up, right? However, it's not just that, it's also to change the colors themselves between each other, right? So you have all of the different mix modes. You could do multiply, right? And so now you have the opposite of what we had before. And then you also have like other options like overlay, and all of this, when you mess with the grade opacity and the warp gain, this really kind of pushes it to the nth degree. So if something is not exactly where you want it to be, you want it to be thicker, you want it to be thinner, you want it to really have a real delineation, there's ways to make that happen. Just tinker with you to your heart's content. That was the reason why I set this up. So now there's also the option for solid. Solid only really kind of works when you have the gradation opacity set up higher. And the reason why is because there's no gradation, there's no radial or vertical gradient mixing with the fractal and the meta to create a different sense of depth. This is just a straight background. So there's really not much there. Or there is nothing there, so it's just straight the fractal or the meta being affected. So sometimes you can get some really interesting effects, and you may want this set up this way, and so that's the reason why that's there. Again, line row amount, right, and row size, right. And you can increase the row size so you don't see the rows at all. You're just seeing just the bleeding of the noise, which is nice. You may want that, but the reason why it's set up like this is because, not because I want you to just be able to do that, but there may be times when you're setting your row amount like really, really, really high, and then you basically like shrink this row size down to like almost nothing, next to nothing, or vice versa. You may want just a few lines, but you want those lines to be massively thick, right? I wanted you to have the ability to do so. Because actually one of my other testers, he was doing this. He really liked this idea. He wanted the lines at the top, and he really, really enjoyed just having a few lines instead of like a whole bunch of lines. And again, same kind of thing as before. You can change your warp. You can change your, you could add in vertical gradient or radial. You'll notice that here, the radial really kind of does show up a little bit more. You'll see that it starts to bend in the middle section, and that's because the radial gradient is in the middle. Finally, we also have the mirror option, which just basically takes everything that you see before you and it mirrors it. The only thing with the mirror is that I didn't put in an option to change the size of the mirror, but I didn't think that it really needed to be like changed very much. And the reason being is because it's already pretty, I didn't think you needed to go much smaller than this or much bigger than this, right? So like, for instance, if I take the zoom in and out, this actually kind of increases that, right? And so if you really, really, really wanted to look like this, you could, right? So there is a way to shrink that, or to shrink to make the mirror modifier thicker or larger groupings of your fractal or your meta shapes, right? But I feel that it's not necessary to have like a separate zooming for just the mirror, because you can with the zoom in and zoom out from the top, basically. So the final things are what I typically set up in patches, and some of this will be renamed. I'm noticing like this one says section 2. This one shouldn't say section 2. It actually should say trigger or types of different controls to trigger the beats, right? I throw this in for almost every patch that I do because I think it's important. This is to just kind of, trigger certain things to happen over and over. You may want it to have this kind of effect, right? So it's beating to the music. My transport beat is actually set to this, so it's to your tap. And then you can resync it to your music. You have just trigger. Some people don't want just trigger because they want to be able to trigger it themselves. And then you also have your attack time and your release time, right, for that trigger, so that it really changes the speed of which that happens, right? So now the release time is taking longer, right? Where if I shorten it, it'll be just like almost instantaneous. Okay, same thing with attack time. I can set up the attack time, and it'll take longer to do the attack. Okay. And then there's so you have your attack time, your release time, and then you have your metronome. The reason for the metronome is because I actually had a gentleman who wanted a metronome. Every now and then when we talk, that was an important thing to him, because he wanted to be able to control, like, as it gets closer into the beat and the what do they call that? The ramp up. He wanted to be able to control the ramp up by himself. And so I always put this in with all three together. And then finally there's the trigger amount. I'm trying to remember where this one is set. I got to figure that out. That may be a residual holdover. I think that was to signify where it's triggering. I need to look into that one, why that one's triggering. Let me change it back to just trigger. Okay, so if I move this here, I think that was right to stop it where you wanted it. But I don't think this is, I think I'm just going to take out this last one because it's not necessary. It's just an extra. It's a holdover from when the HeartLines was just forming. There were other options that had available. I tend to do this, like when I create a patch, I have all these crazy and wild ideas, and then I just whittle them down to what I think is helpful and useful to my clients or to my customers, which also kind of leads into the next questions, or the questions, comments, complaints, concerns. As always, as I say in all my tutorials, if you have any questions, comments, complaints, concerns, send them my way. jacobmesick@gmail.com is my email address. Thank you very much for watching. I am very interested if you guys have any other ideas for patches that you would like to see. If there's something that you're not quite sure of and you just like to know a little bit more about how Wire works or Resolume, let me know to that as well, because I do a lot of different things. I do one-on-one teaching. I also teach a course on Discord through Click. You can find me on the Slack channel for Resolume. You can find me in all different social medias under my name, Jacob Mesick. Hey, thank you very much for watching this tutorial. I hope you enjoy it. If you have any other questions, give me a holler. I'll talk to you guys later. Thank you very much and have a great day.